My name is Thomas Miller. I'm 63 years old. I've been married for 20 of those years, and I spent 35 years of my life working in a steel plant where time moved in shifts, not seasons. My days used to start with the hiss of steam and end with the weight of iron in my bones. That factory, it took most of my back, both of my knees, and nearly all of my patience for small talk. But it also gave me a kind of rhythm, repetition that felt like purpose. It's funny. People think when you retire, you finally get to live. But if you're not careful, retirement can feel like standing in a house where the clocks have all stopped. And if you don't find something of your own, the silence will start to echo. I met Laura in my early 40s. She was smart, director, beautiful in the way strong women are, like she knew where she was going and had no interest in asking for directions. I like that. I still do in a way. We married after 2 years together. Both of us had been married before, and both of us thought we knew what we were doing this time. I moved into her house. She had a good job in local government, city contracts, zoning, that sort of thing. She made more than me. Always did. That never bothered me. I wasn't raised to measure myself against my wife's wallet, but she was particular, practical, efficient. That was her word for everything. Efficient. Sometimes I think that word ended up building a small, invisible wall between us. Not a loud one. Not the kind that comes with yelling or slammed doors. Just bricks of logic, stacked so neatly that you didn't realize they'd boxed you in. Now my father, he was the opposite of efficient. The man could spend 2 hours making a sandwich, but he'd tell a story while he did it. And by the end, you weren't even hungry anymore. You were just full of something else. Peace, maybe. Memory. When I was a boy, he bought a small plot of land out by Clearwater Lake. It wasn't much. No house, just grass, trees, and a view that made you stop breathing for a second. He took me there every summer, just the two of us. Fishing in the mornings, coffee on the shore before the sun got too high. He'd bring a little radio and play jazz while he tied knots or whittled sticks for no reason at all. It was his quiet place. Eventually, it became mine too. When he passed, I didn't cry at the funeral, but when the attorney handed me the deed, Thomas Miller, sole inheritor of parcel 117B, I had to step outside. Not because of the paper, but because of what it meant. It meant my father had trusted me with something that wasn't about money. It was about remembering. I didn't build on it. I didn't sell it. Didn't visit much, to be honest. But I always kept it. Paid the taxes every year. Checked the mail in case anything changed. That little square of earth was never far from me, even when I wasn't near it. Laura used to call it your ghost land. She'd laugh when she said it, but not the warm kind of laugh. More like a tap, to see if I'd been. I didn't. Some things you don't need to explain. Some places you don't need to go every day. They live inside you, and you honor them by letting them be. I suppose in hindsight, that's where the trouble started. But I didn't know that yet. At that time, I still believed that what was mine, even if unused, was understood, respected, safe. Funny thing about belief, it doesn't always ask the right questions. It was a Tuesday, early spring, that in-between season where the sun is out, but the cold still lingers like it doesn't know it's been asked to leave. I remember that because I'd just trimmed the hedges and my hands were red from the wind. The mail came late that day, around 4 p.m. Laura was upstairs on a Zoom call, talking in her clipped, professional tone. I stood at the counter, sorting through coupons and circulars when I saw the envelope. No return address. Just that cold, mechanical typeface. Hamilton County Assessor's Office. It didn't ring alarm bells at first. Once you hit 60, you get used to mail. That sounds like trouble, but isn't. But when I opened it, something in my chest pulled tight. This notice is to inform you that the ownership record of parcel 117B, Clearwater Township, has been updated in accordance with the finalized sale agreement. Please note the change in property tax valuation. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was confusion, sharp and total, like looking at your own name spelled wrong on a tombstone. I read the letter again, then a third time. I flipped it over, looking for an error, an explanation, There wasn't one. I walked to the file cabinet in the corner of the den, where we kept our important documents. The deed was still there. My father's signature, faded but proud. My name typed clearly, but now I didn't own it. I stood there for several minutes, not breathing, not thinking, just adjusting. When I finally went upstairs, Laura had just ended her meeting. She was putting her glasses down on the desk, still in that posture of authority she carried from her job. "You okay?" she asked, not looking up. I held the paper in my hand, but didn't show it to her yet. "Laura," I said, "did you do something with the lake land?" She turned her head slightly like I'd asked if she'd moved the remote. "Oh, yes," she said like we were discussing groceries. "I filed the sale last month. There was a buyer. It was a good offer. I figured you never go there anyway." I didn't answer. Not right away. She noticed the pause, the weight in the room. "Don't look at me like that, Tom," she said. "It's not like it was doing anything. I issued a power of attorney, under the household provision. Technically, I had the right." Technically, that word. It sat between us like a cracked teacup. Still upright, but useless now. She kept talking about how the taxes would have gone up next year, how the buyer was a friend of a client, someone looking to develop retirement homes by the lake, how I was too sentimental about patches of dirt. "Look," she said, softening her voice in that way people do when they're trying to sell you something you already lost. "It's not like your father's going to know. You have the memories, don't you?" I remember blinking, just blinking, because something inside me had slipped. Not snapped, not yet, just slid out of place. I said 5 words, all I could say. "Got it. Thanks for telling me." That was it. No yelling, no accusations, no threats. I walked into the kitchen, made coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, sat at the table, let the silence settle over me like snowfall. She moved on with her evening, like nothing had happened. But for me, something had, and it wouldn't be undone by words. I didn't bring it up again. Not the next morning, not that week. Laura didn't notice, or maybe she did, and hoped I'd let it go. We kept moving through life like always. She had her calls, her friends, her structured calendar. I had my routines, a walk around the block, the paper, old tools in the garage I pretended still had purpose. But inside, something had shifted, like someone had turned off the heat in a room you didn't realize you loved until it was cold. I thought about my father, his voice, his stories, his hands pulling coffee from that old tin thermos, steam rising over the lake. He used to say, "A man can lose his job, his pride, even his health, but if he's lucky, he gets to keep one place in the world that still remembers who he used to be." That land was mine, not because of a deed, because of mornings, because of memory, and now it belonged to someone else. Thanks to my wife who didn't even tell me. That week I started waking earlier, 5 a.m., sometimes 4. I couldn't sleep. So I made coffee in silence and started digging. I opened old bank files, looked for transactions I didn't remember signing. There it was, a wire transfer, 5 figures, to an account I didn't recognize. I dug deeper. 3 weeks before the letter from the assessor, she'd filed a sale agreement under her name, Laura H. Miller, acting under joint marital authority. She hadn't forged my signature. She didn't have to. She'd found a legal loophole, and she'd used it, without even a conversation. I remember sitting in front of my laptop, the blue light cold on my face, reading that line again and again. Transfer completed. Funds dispersed. Like that land had been nothing more than a chess piece she could move. I didn't call her out. I didn't confront her. I just closed the laptop, sipped my coffee, and stared out the window at the empty street. 3 days later, I drove to see Robert, an old friend from my factory days who'd retired early and now worked in private construction and consulting. The kind of man who knew how things moved without being seen. He opened the door, grinned at me like we were 25 again. "You look like hell," he said. "You planning a divorce or a crime?" "Not yet," I said. "Just need a name." He knew not to ask too many questions. I gave him the parcel number, the township, and the date of transfer. 3 days later, he called me back. I found him, he said. New owner's a guy named Carson Ridgewell, out-of-state buyer, owns 2 construction firms, paid in cash through a holding company. I asked what he was doing with the land. Nothing, not yet. Probably just parking money. He's flipping lots like cards these days. I paused. Think he'd sell it back? At a price? Maybe. You want me to ask? No, I said. I want you to buy it. Silence on the line. You serious? I'll pay. Quietly. Through you. No names, no trails. Just get me my father's land back. That night, I didn't say a word to Laura. She was watching a documentary, some crime series. Irony writes itself sometimes. I sat on the porch, coat zipped up, hands in my pockets. I didn't feel angry, not anymore. I felt certain. The kind of quiet that doesn't pass. The kind that grows roots. Robert handled the paperwork with the precision of a surgeon. He said Ridgewell didn't even blink at the offer. Offered 25% over what he paid. Guy said yes before I finished the sentence. Sent the deed over the next day. I wired the money the same afternoon. Not from our joint account. No, I'd been careful. Over the years, I'd set aside a quiet nest egg. Every month, a little scraped off the top and buried in a separate credit union account. Laura thought I used it to pay for old car repairs and the occasional fishing trip. She never asked for more. That money bought me back what she gave away. Robert signed as the buyer. His firm processed everything under a shell holding company, all clean, all legal. Nothing tied to the name Thomas Miller. Just a quiet transaction. One man taking back what was his, quietly, patiently. By the end of the month, I had the deed in hand, title in the company's name, but beneficiary rights handed to me. No drama, no shouting, no "how could you" scene in the kitchen. Laura had no idea. She still thought the land was gone, sold to some real estate group looking to turn the shoreline into rental cabins. She even mentioned it in passing one night, cutting carrots at the counter. That place is going to be crawling with tourists by summer, she said without looking at me. Probably better. It was just sitting there. I nodded. Yeah, probably better. But I wasn't thinking about tourists. I was thinking about sunrise, about the exact angle where it came up over the tree line, reflected in the lake like a second sun. Where my dad would sit in that same spot with a cigar, telling me that real peace wasn't loud. It was still, like water. I knew what I had to build. Not a mansion, not a statement, just a home. One house. Wood. Glass. Stone. Facing the lake. Nothing behind it but forest. Robert said he had a crew. Discreet. Fast, not cheap. You're sure you want to start this without telling her? Absolutely, I said. Then you'll need an architect. I met the architect 2 weeks later. A quiet woman named Melinda, in her 50s, with sharp glasses and a soft voice. She asked me what I wanted the house to feel like. Like memory, I told her. Like I walked back into something I thought I'd lost. She smiled without judgment. I know exactly what that looks like, she said. We spent the next month designing it. Not big, just true. Panoramic windows facing the water. Natural wood floors, a stone fireplace. 1 bedroom, 1 study, an open veranda, and space for a small plaque just above the front door. The crew started breaking ground in April. I drove up twice a week, early in the morning, before Laura woke up. Told her I was walking, clearing my head, maybe meeting Robert for breakfast. She didn't ask questions. She thought I was still licking my wounds. In truth, I was watching concrete get poured into a foundation where my father's old boots once stood. I stood with my hands in my pockets, eyes fixed forward, heart steady. The lake was still there. The same breeze, the same birdsong. The world had waited for me, and now I was coming home. The last shingle went onto the roof just before the rain started in October. 6.5 months from blueprint to build. Efficient, precise, almost surgical. Melinda walked through it with me the day we finished. No ceremony, no champagne, no wide ribbons to cut. Just me, her, and the sound of the lake through the open veranda door. It feels quiet, she said, running a hand along the edge of the fireplace stone. The right kind of quiet. That's all I wanted. The plaque arrived a few days later. Steel, brushed matte finish, bold engraving, heavy in the hands, heavy with meaning. I didn't install it right away. I kept it in the study for a while, beside a picture of my father that Laura never liked. She said he looked too stern. He was stern, but he was honest, and he was mine. I moved in mid-November. I didn't make a grand exit. Told Laura I needed time to think. Packed a duffel bag with clothes and tools. Left a note that said, taking space. Be back before Thanksgiving. She didn't call. I think she expected me to crawl into a motel for a few weeks, lick my wounds, and return to her like a half-scolded dog. Instead, I lit the first fire in the new fireplace. Watched the sun set through floor-to-ceiling glass. Brewed coffee on the same camp stove I used with my dad 30 years ago. The lake hadn't changed, but I had. On the third morning, I took out the plaque. I screwed it into the dark wood above the door. It was centered, perfect. It caught the light in the early dawn. The engraving read, Father's House. I returned home. And beneath that, owner T. Miller. Not Thomas and Laura, not the Millers, just me. I slept deeper that night than I had in years. No noise, no tension, no sideways glances over dinner or the dull ache of unspoken resentments. I cooked simple meals, read old books, chopped wood when it got cold. Some days I'd walk the same trails my dad and I once took. Leave a folding chair at the shoreline and just sit there, watching the water fold over itself. I didn't call Laura, didn't need to, because I knew that sooner or later she would go back. Not for me, not for us, for the story, for the idea of the land, for the echo of something she thought still belonged to her. And when she arrived, I wanted everything to be in place. The house, the windows, the plaque, and me, sitting there like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence she didn't finish. It was a Friday, late April. The lake was waking up again, melted clean, the trees still bare but itching to bloom. I was out on the veranda with a mug of black coffee, the same enamel cup I used for years on camping trips. The wind was soft, the world quiet. Even the birds seemed to whisper that morning. And then I heard tires on gravel, slow, crunching, hesitant. I didn't move, just stayed in the chair, one ankle crossed over the other, both hands on the cup. The car pulled up, dark blue, compact, familiar. Laura's sedan. She didn't step out immediately. I could see her silhouette behind the windshield, motionless. Eventually, she pushed open the door and stood there, one hand braced on the roof, dressed in jeans and an old jacket I hadn't seen in years. Probably one she kept in the back of the hall closet, a lake jacket, from the days when this place meant something else to her. She looked thinner, maybe tired, maybe just uncertain. I didn't wave, didn't call out. I let the house speak first. She walked slowly, past the gravel drive, to the footpath, to the house. Her eyes roamed the wood, the glass, the slope of the roof, the chairs on the porch. And then, she saw the plaque. She paused, stared at it, read it once, then again. I watched the color drain from her face like water down a sink. "You built this?" she finally said, her voice dry. I nodded. "You bought it back." Another nod. She stared at me for a long time, waiting for more. An explanation, an outburst, some cathartic monologue like in the movies. But I didn't give her one. Just sat there, calm, not cruel, not angry, just done. She took a shaky step forward. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked up at her and said it as plainly as I could. "Because it wasn't yours to know." She blinked like I'd struck her with the edge of a sentence she didn't expect. "You never even went there," she said quietly. "You let it rot." I gestured to the trees, the lake, the house. "Looks pretty whole to me." She took another step up toward the porch but didn't cross it. Her eyes flicked again to the plaque. "Father's house. I returned home. Owner T. Miller." There was no mention of her, no trace, no welcome mat, just me and silence. "So this is it," she said. "This is your big revenge?" I shook my head. "This isn't revenge." And then I stood up, steady, slow, walked toward the door. "This is peace." I stepped inside. "You were right," I said, pausing in the doorway. I hadn't been here in a long time. Then I turned to face her one last time. "But now I'm here." And I closed the door, softly, completely. Through the glass, I saw her stand there for a few seconds longer. Then she turned, got in her car, and drove away. She never came back. It's been over a year. The seasons have circled like clockwork around this house. Spring bloomed late, summer came early, autumn burned gold, and winter was honest. I've learned to live with it all. The quiet, the chill, the occasional ache in my knees when the wind rolls off the lake too sharp. But there's peace in it now, even the kind that doesn't sing, the kind that just rests. Laura never came back, not to call, not to write, not to demand answers that I had long since buried. I heard through a neighbor that she'd told people I ran off to some cabin. Let her have that. Let her call it a cabin. Let her call it running off. It doesn't matter, because I don't owe the world an explanation for something that finally makes sense. The plaque still shines in the morning. Some days I polish it, not because it needs it, but because I do. It reminds me that clarity takes work, and memory, like metal, needs care or it rusts. Father's house, I returned home. Owner, T. Miller. That wasn't just a message for her. It was a message for me. A man who spent too many years making peace by giving up pieces of himself. A man who thought that keeping quiet meant keeping the peace. But there's another kind of silence. Not the one used to hide hurt, the one that follows a choice fully made. I still make coffee in the same enamel cup. Sometimes I sit out by the water and imagine my father beside me. Sleeves rolled up, boots in the dew, thermos between us. He never said much either. But he knew how to stay and how to leave when the time came. Now this house holds both stories, his and mine, and in a way, even hers. But only the truth remains. The land is mine, the peace is mine, the silence is mine. And in that silence I am home.